Welcome back to our Peace Through Strength podcast, brought to you by the American Security Council Foundation. I'm your host, Joy Votrobek, and back with me is our senior analyst, Laurence Sanford.
Nice to be here, Joy.
Hi, Larry. And today we are going to talk about the expansion of BRICS to include Iran, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Ethiopia. Larry wrote an article back in January titled Bigger BRICS. And you can find all of Larry's articles on our website at www.ascf. You can find our podcast there as well, and we encourage you to become a member of the ASCF for just $100 a year, which will also include a paid subscription to our Substack, which Larry writes on regularly, and our newsletter as well. So Larry, after this expansion of BRICS, Iran and Saudi Arabia have now resumed talks brokered by China. My question to you is, do you think that BRICS is gaining enough traction to move international trade away from the US dollar?
Yes. I think there's a definite uptrend in regards to BRICS, and it's an alternative to the United States dollar dominating the world trade. And poorer countries, when they reach their credit limits, run out of US dollars, they have severe problems of maintaining their economy and making the population happy. So having BRICS Development Bank as an alternative source of funding is a great assistance. And then, last but not least, if I were a smaller country and I was their leader, I'd want to have an alternative to the U.S. domination. I'd like to have another competitor. Competition is good. So, in a way, BRICS is perfectly understandable. And at one time, the G7, the big industrial countries of the world, mainly Europe, the United States, and Japan, dominated the world economy. BRICS right now, their economies of India and China and Russia, their economies are greater than the combined economies of the G7. So there's definitely alternatives developing to the US dollar, and certainly China is pushing it because they certainly want to bring down the United States, as does Russia. Of all the BRICS, there's only one country that might be considered neutral, and that's India. And I'm not so sure they're happy in being part of BRICS, because if you're in BRICS, you have Brazil, run by Lula, who's socialist. You have Russia, which is run by Putin, who doesn't like America. India's sort of in between. India is India. And China, of course, doesn't like America. And last but not least, South Africa is showing its two colors with its genocide attacks on Israel in the World Court. And that, to me, indicates that South Africa is pretty much run by communists now.
Another paper that he wrote on South Africa supporting Hamas.
So
very interesting.
All those countries are sort of aligned against the United States.
And India, like you said, it's interesting there because they're not real happy with China on their border. So,
well, and a good example of India, and India is going to represent India. I mean, they're the most populous country in the world now, and they have a wonderful history and culture that goes back thousands of years. But they, a couple of years ago, they banned TikTok and all the Chinese apps because they said that the Chinese apps and TikTok in particular were polluting their culture and their people. So.
Certainly something we should consider as well.
I wish we'd follow their example on that score.
But I'm glad you brought up about poorer countries or smaller countries having alternative to the U.S. dollar, because I'm assuming that's why a lot of them would consider joining BRICS.
Yes, and of course China has the Belt and Road Initiative, where they sign these hidden deals with the leaders so that the leaders get cash or whatever they want stashed away in Switzerland. And they sign these deals that when they get out of office, of course, the poor people of the country are now obligated to pay to the Chinese for the bridges and buildings and stadiums, the dams that they have built. China has built some dams in South America, for example, with a talk that these dams might crumble because of the shoddy workmanship, yet the people are stuck with loans that no one knows about until it's time to collect.
And a lot of times they're having to repay with their own resources.
Precisely. They end up being nothing but colonies of China. So.
Well, moving on to that. So Argentina, you wrote in here, and I thought this was interesting, that they were invited to join BRICS under Fernandez. But when, am I saying this correctly, Milei?
Yeah, Milei
took over, he has said he is intended to align more with the U.S. So do you think he will stay with that, considering that
yeah, I think philosophically he's aligned with freedom. He's a capitalist, more so than our leaders. And one of his ads during the campaigns was with a chainsaw to cut bureaucracies and all the trade restrictions. So he's freeing up Argentina to become more free market. I hesitate to use the word capitalism because Adam Smith, the founder of free markets, never used that term. Capitalist is a Marxist term. We're really in a free market economy. So he's trying to make Argentina more of a free market economy. They have terrible restrictions on the export of grains and the farmers, and so I think he's freeing it up. So I think we're okay with him. He's okay. He's gonna.
Do you think we'll see some decoupling from China there? Maybe?
No, money is money. He's going to keep on selling China as long as he can, and but he's softening his tone. I mean, during his campaign, he called the Pope an idiot, and now he's over there in Italy hugging and kissing the Pope. So I think he's softening some of his tone.
Recognizing some
the reality. Many Argentinians are Catholic and aren't happy with that. Yeah. Calling him an idiot, that is.
Yes, I can imagine that one. Now, moving on to our peace through strength solutions. So your action plans here, and I thought the first one was very interesting because you had talked about it in your paper, was stop imposing sanctions. And I know we discussed this a lot, but here where you say that freezing Russia's holdings on the dollar may have temporarily hampered Russia's war efforts, but freezing also sent a signal to other countries with differing geopolitical views that the U.S. could do to them what it did to Russia.
The U.S. has a reputation, justified in many respects, of being a bully. And by freezing a country's assets, Iran's another one, North Korea. The sanctions might be justified in one sense, but it sends a message to the rest of the world that if you get on the wrong side of Uncle Sam, they're going to freeze your assets and try to ruin your economy. And long term, the sanctions don't work. We've discussed before. Cuba's still doing okay 60 years later, and we look like the bad guys because we're a bully to Cuba.
And we've just pushed Russia more toward China and India. So.
And the sanctions on the oil, and so instead of the oil and gas going to Western Europe, they're going to India and China. So it don't work. I've interviewed a couple of folks recently who are very knowledgeable. And one of the questions I always ask is, do you believe in sanctions? Nobody, on my side of the fence anyways, believe that sanctions work, that we should be doing other things. And a good example is just the sanctions on Cuba is a perfect example. If they still trade with us, they can trade with the rest of the world. We're not stopping the rest of the world from trading. Yet they hold that in our face. They use the Yankee imperialism. Whereas it's not our fault they're poor, it's their fault that they're communists, and communism doesn't work. No.
And second, Larry, you mentioned stop the massive subsidies to so-called green energy, which tear down American industries and build up Chinese industries.
To me, it's beyond credibility that we're doing what we're doing to ourselves. We're tearing down the heartland of America, the automobile industry, the oil industry. The U.S. has plenty of oil and gas to keep us going. Fossil fuels are the bedrock of industrialization. And China has generated the green energy mammoth that it has become by lithium batteries, state subsidies. And so we're going to go from gas-powered vehicles to electric-powered vehicles that are heavier, that are going to cause problems. A lot of parking lots, I never thought of this until recently, a lot of parking lots have weight restrictions. So if you have a 10-story parking lot for cars designed to weigh 20,000 pounds, with batteries they weigh 30,000 pounds or whatever it is, it's significantly heavier. All these parking garages have to be recalibrated as far as weight bearing is concerned. So you have that, the damage to the roads, the damage to the railings, they plow right through because they're so heavy. During cold weather, they don't run. You can't charge them. And I have a nephew who run a very successful repair business up in New England. And I asked, automobiles, and I asked him, what do you do when there's a fire with a lithium battery car? And he says, you let it burn. There's no way to stop it. And we've seen all sorts of damages from lithium batteries as far as fires. You can't control the thing. So here we are subsidizing electric vehicles when no one wants them, except the biggest sellers for electric vehicles are those upper middle class and rich people who have 2 or 3 cars. And the electric vehicle is their second or third car. They still have the gas car for dependability. So
the average American's not going to be able to afford
they
an
don't
electric
want
car.
that. They're smarter than the guys in Washington. I want a car that's reliable and cheaper. And the gas, and so here we are tearing down our native industries that we're strong in to subsidize China. So we're subsidizing battery plants in America run by Chinese technology. Billions and billions of dollars are going into the EVs. And then billions and billions of dollars are going into windmills that kill thousands of birds. That, I know you're going to be shocked to hear this, that when the wind doesn't blow, the windmills don't work. And solar energy doesn't work when the sun goes down. So here we are subsidizing billions and billions of dollars, tearing down the infrastructure of America when we should be building up nuclear power and we should be continuing to stay with natural gas. China, for all its buildup of green power, still is building 2 plants a week of coal-powered plants. So they're the world's biggest hypocrites. So.
They're gaining off of our green energy subsidies, as you said. And also, I think you brought up a good point with the infrastructure and the parking lots and all that. We're just, and I think most Americans would agree, we're not to a point where we're ready to go completely with this zero emissions because our infrastructure is not in place. Like you were saying, we have tremendous supply of oil and gas here, and we are trillions of dollars in debt. So we should use this to our advantage instead of giving it to the CCP.
And Europe is trying to get away from Russian gas and oil, and so they were dependent upon American exports of natural gas. And Biden just put a moratorium on more development of exports.
That doesn't seem to make sense, but. Well, thank you for your thoughts on that, Larry.
Thank you, Joy.
I appreciate
As always,
your article.
I enjoy talking. So.
And to our listeners, please send your thoughts on the expansion of BRICS, the BRICS bloc itself, the sanctions, and green energy. You can comment on our YouTube and Rumble channels. You can read Larry's full article at www.ascf.us. Please consider becoming a member of the ASCF for $100 a year, less than $10 a month, and it'll include a paid subscription to Substack, where you can read more of Larry's articles and other articles we put out as well. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you again, Larry.
Thank you, Joy.
Thank you to our listeners. And join us again next time on our Peace Through Strength podcast.